Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you're watching Newzroom Afrika's continuing coverage as we build up to President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet reshuffle announcement. It was expected to happen at 7 o'clock. It's now been pushed back to 8 p.m. tonight. Let's talk further about this with the Wits University Professor Alex van der Heever, who's with me in studio. Very good evening to you. Prof, thank you so much for coming in. So, a delay, does it matter at this point? We've waited 3 months.
Yeah, I don't think the delay matters, but it's probably an indicator of the nature of the process and the trade-offs that are being considered at this point on the various sort of power plays that are in play. So I do think there is an issue there, but the question is, what are the trade-offs? Are they between factions within the ANC, or are they about our policies that have to be implemented efficiently? And I would think that they're more toward the former.
You mentioned factions within the ANC. The IFP had a statement out this morning in anticipation of this announcement saying, it's time to put country before party, and that whatever cabinet reconfiguration happens by Ramaphosa needs to be done with the interests of South Africa put ahead of political internal dynamics in the ANC. But realistically, is that possible?
I don't think it is possible, unfortunately, and not the way things have played out. I think that the president is in a fairly difficult position in which he's had to potentially make many compromises in order to be able to stay in power. And those compromises are within the ANC. They're not within policy. And the problem has been that they've affected the quality of leadership of his cabinet and the nature of the cabinet as well. The cabinet is bloated. The cabinet, in many cases, has incompetent people in charge. And the question is whether he can actually address that.
What are the compromises you think he's made, he's made, which are now working against him or have him in a corner?
Well, he's kept a lot of what some would term his enemies in the cabinet, and he might have done that as part of an idea of building unity, but it's a fake unity. It's a unity of special interests, not public interests. Those special interests are potentially groups of people who've had a finger in the pie, have been part of state corruption. They haven't been fingered, they haven't been put in jail because many of our state institutions have been corrupted, and it makes it quite difficult to investigate, prosecute, and put people in prison if you've disrupted the nature of our state. So a lot of them are there, but who should be in jail potentially, but they're also sitting in cabinet potentially.
And how well has the Ramaphosa administration done in addressing what it basically wants to limit to the quote-unquote state capture years, even though some have argued that state capture is still well and truly alive?
I think it is very well and truly alive. We've attacked one aspect of state capture, in particular institutions, and those potentially instigated by the former president. Yeah. But what we're not dealing with potentially is the systemic nature of corruption that has impacted on the state. And that capture is pretty pervasive, affects all institutions to date, many municipalities, provincial governments, as well as our state-owned enterprises. So it's pervasive, and it hasn't been addressed systematically. And what has happened is we've removed some bad apples out of the sort of state capture process, but we actually haven't addressed the systemic problems that are causing state capture today. And that suggests that he doesn't really either want to or have the power to address them.
What would happen if he did that? Because at the ANC conference when he won, some were saying, presidents in their second and final term are usually more bold, more decisive. But if he's not decisive or seen to be decisive tonight, how will that work against Ramaphosa, both in terms of public perception and in reality?
Well, his trade-off might be that he survives his own political factions, but loses the confidence of the public. And in losing the confidence of the public, there is a bit of a struggle going on within the ANC, who would like to see the president toppled in favor of an alternative RET-type candidate, and which would be disastrous for South Africa. But that faction, in attacking the president in the manner in which they're doing, are probably undermining the ANC as a whole as a political party going forward and their viability. Their brand is being substantially implicated in what's happening today. Everything, all the failures. And so it doesn't quite So he's got to basically deal with that, and the ANC has to deal with that, and they might be sacrificing their brand in order to kind of keep the balance of power within the ANC at this point in time, and hope they can survive an election.
Something else that's happened today, we've learned that SARS has said it basically cannot find records of a declaration of about $580,000 which was, we're told, spent at the auction at Phala Phala. That's now become controversial in 2020. President Ramaphosa himself facing several investigations as a result. How big of a threat is that to him finishing this term?
I'm not sure it's a threat to him finishing the term, but it kind of raises the question or the issue. It's kind of good to be the president when you're dealing with SARS. I wish I had that relationship and could get away with earning income and not paying my taxes, and not declaring income. So I think it's problematic and it has to be addressed. I'm not sure whether it impacts directly on his finishing his term. I think we've got, serious concerns about who would take over from Cyril Ramaphosa if he is removed.
For Mashatile, is he a solid option for a president, an emergency president who'd have to step in if Ramaphosa, let's say, faces the SARS issue, is negative as far as Phala Phala is concerned, and the multiple other investigations being conducted into the same matter?
I think there are a lot of concerns about Paul Mashatile's handling of the Gauteng province over a number of years, and what fingers he had in his pies at that point. And it's unclear whether he's got a squeaky clean track record. As I've indicated before, there are
Does any politician ever have a squeaky clean record?
It depends on what. If it's basically dipping into the public pot, that's a very, very serious matter, and we should apply a very high standard to politicians for doing that. And we haven't to date. So I think that there's a record there. Gauteng did not do well during the period when he was kind of very much in the sort of up and up in Gauteng. The health system went into decline from 2006 in Gauteng. It was running reasonably well up until that point. And basic education and the rest of the province and basic infrastructure. And we've seen a continuous decline from that point. So I would be concerned about him being in the deputy presidency. And I think there might be things we don't know about that are also pretty scary.
We were showing earlier just visuals of some of the people whose names have been thrown into the public arena as potential cabinet appointments. One of them, former KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala, whom we know has now been sworn in as a member of parliament. You've got Parks Dau, the former mayor of Johannesburg, also being touted as a potential candidate for a cabinet vacancy. Interestingly, who's already working in the presidency, has already had reporting around him potentially being appointed the electricity minister. From those three, do you have one who you think would be most suited to the task?
It's very difficult to say. I'm not sure that many of them have great track records in their own provinces. We've had a serious decline in the Joburg Metro. We've had a decline overall in the Tshwane Metro, and we also had a very, very severe decline in KZN. So all of those, the history of the track record of getting things done in the public interest is weak in all three of those candidates. Doesn't mean they won't make it, but if we were picking people based on delivery, none of them stands out.
But how well have we done in this country as far as presidents appointing people on merit, i.e. because they've got an incredible track record? Does that really appear to be what determines these appointments?
No, it doesn't. And this is part of the problem with the nature of our democratic process at the moment. In fact, we should be holding political parties to account for the way the party bosses organize who actually gets in control of the public purse. We're not doing that. And in many other democracies, the way in which the electoral system operates results in people being very careful about who ends up in these positions. In the South African context, parties basically determine, not the electorate, determine who ends up in senior positions within government. So party lists, party enforcement, and then party decisions and backroom discussions about who gets what where. And the quid pro quos involved are not about the public interest, and that's the concern. We're seeing the consequences of that. The consequence of that is that we don't have people placed in these positions because they understand their posts and they're going to act in the public interest. It is potentially because a lot of them are engaging in patronage politics in which they are essentially abusing their position in public office to improve both their own political fortunes as well as those of people outside the state. And this is actually the problem we're facing. We do need to have the electorate make the key decisions about who ends up in leadership.
So is the issue then the ANC or the system?
It's both. I think that what happens is that the system generates the ANC that we see. It's created incentives and perverse incentives within political parties. So at the moment, much of our political party system operates on a party boss system. And you don't really see the machinery working behind the scenes. And what you want to do is hold every party to account for the quality of the people that end up in the key posts and positions. We haven't done that or been able to do that through our electoral system up until now. The question really is whether we can build more specificity into the electoral system so that, in fact, when you do this and the party bosses make these kinds of bad decisions, that they are penalized at the polls in a very, very fundamental way.
Professor Alexander Heerden, you'll be with us, of course, throughout the evening as we wait for the cabinet reshuffle announcement. For now, let's leave it there, bring you some other news still to come.